All right. Thank you all for joining. This is the November WildSeed Fireside Chat. We're here in a special event uh, hosting with our sister organization, the WildSeed Wellness Cooperative, and we are just going to be talking about holiday wellness planning. Holidays can be a really joyful time. They can also be a really stressful time, sometimes a really lonely time, and in this current moment can sometimes be an unsafe time, particularly for traveling internationally. So we just wanted to have a space and talk a little bit about what you can do to be sane, well, and rested in the holidays. So I'm Aaron Goggins. I am the steward of the pattern and kind of person who oversees our strategy and hosts a lot of these fireside chats for the WildSeed Society, and then also the treasurer for the WildSeed Wellness Co-op. And I am joined by my comrade Channy, who is a co-founder of WildSeed, the president of the WildSeed Wellness Co-op, and also a healing-centered life coach at the co-op. And Channy tends the invisible threads that hold people and movements together. They nurture the emotional and support networks that allow individuals and the collective to thrive. Their work lives in the quiet, crucial spaces where care becomes practice. Um, and if you've been coming to Wild Day Things for a while, you've probably met Channy, but thanks so much, Channy, for joining. And super excited to be uh, joined here by Dr. Melissa Fabello. I realize I have never said your name to you. I hope I pronounced your last name
Good.
correctly.
Good.
Uh, Dr. Fabello is a sex and relationship coach who works with leftists to help align their political values with how they show up in interpersonal relationships. She specializes in issues such as non-monogamy, queer identity, attachment, and intimate partner violence. In her one-on-one coaching work, she helps you clarify your values, own your truth, and build new relational skills. She holds a PhD in human sexuality studies. Um, and Dr. Fabella is also an affiliate with the WildSeed Wellness Co-op. So we're very excited to have launched the co-op last month and to bring on affiliates so that if you are looking for wellness support, energy work, coaching, you can also work with our affiliates who are people who are aligned with the way that WildSeed wants to be in the world and can help you align your life in that similar direction. So thank you both so much for joining. Um, and I want to start us off with talking a little bit about to you, Channy, when we're talking about safety, particularly in
Mhm.
regards to like being safe over the holidays, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. I think when we're talking about safety, especially over the holidays, what comes to mind, where my mind immediately goes, is kind of being in safe spaces, either with folks or alone, and where spaces that we feel we can be ourselves without fear of judgment, without fear of punishment, and where we can be authentic and feel what it is that we're feeling without trying to hold some other agenda, whether it's being afraid or whether it's trying to hold another person's feelings or tiptoe around anything. And so when we talk about safety, I think emotional safety kind of comes up first, and especially being able to find these um, micro moments or small spaces, if we're with loved ones during the holidays, where we can almost retreat and find that safety, that either solo regulating space or co-regulating spaces, just to kind of come back to self and take care of ourselves. Obviously, physical safety is a big one as well. We want to make sure as much as we can if we're in spaces, some of us won't be staying at home, we might be staying at loved ones' homes, or we might be staying at new spaces, to just try and pinpoint if there are places physically where we feel like we can retreat to and almost feel any activation or any worry that we've been holding, any performing we've been holding, let that go and focus on ourselves.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Channy. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think safety is kind of a thing we don't think a lot about when it comes to like the holidays and our family, right? I think there is a like uh uh when we recognize that maybe our family was abusive, there's like a whole set of things about like cutting off relationships. But a lot of us, y- if our family was not abusive, but it's still a place where there's a lot of harm, there's still a place where we are going to get asked, why haven't you got married yet? Did you gain weight? Did you, like, why did you do this thing? Or we have people who are going to bring up like ongoing conflicts, right? Like that can make us feel
Mhm.
really unsafe. And we might just say we're irritated, we might have anxiety because we might recognize oh, they're not that bad, right? Or they're, oh, it's irritating, but and when we don't kind of consider safety, we can kind of be unaware of like why we're triggered, why we say that we can I often think when I feel unsafe with my dad, I kind of revert back to like a teenager because I'm just like I'm gonna fight this dude. Like I'm gonna argue with him because I like feel like I need to know where that boundary is because I actually don't feel safe. Something about our patterns of interaction. I'm worried he's gonna like say something. Um and so, Melissa, I wonder if you have any thoughts about like how do we step into um, holiday spaces and kind of build that safety and create the boundaries that can help us be safe.
I mean, this is such a, if I had the answer to this question, let me tell you. No, I think that's a really important piece, and I'm so with you on that. I'll be like, Mom, like it's so 16, like it's so like I just revert straight to a teenager when I'm frustrated within my family system. So I think something for us to recognize about family systems that's really important is that, especially quote unquote dysfunctional family systems, is that we take on a role. And if you're interested, if you're a leftist, let me tell you, your role is probably the scapegoat. I'm just letting you know you are probably the scapegoat. Um, and there's these roles you can look them up, like family system, dysfunctional family system roles. And uh, what happens is we will create entire lives away from our families. We have like our version of ourselves, and we can often have the feeling of whenever we are with our family, everybody just takes their role. It's just automatic. We're not even thinking about it. It's not active. And that's why you feel that sense of like, why am I acting like I'm 15 years old? And it's like, well, because I've just been thrown back into this dynamic and I can't help but take my role. If everyone around me is taking it, I'm going to take it. And I think that this can also be really, really frustrating if you're someone who's like doing the work, like you're going to therapy or reading books, like following a lot of self help accounts. And all of a sudden you go home and it's like, oh, no one else has changed. Huh? And you will find that you'll kind of, yeah, revert back. So, boundaries, to me, the number one most important thing about boundaries is that a boundary does not tell other people what to do. A boundary informs what you will do and will not do. So you can say, my boundary is if you continue to bring up my physical appearance, my weight, uh, whatever, I'm going to leave, or like I'm going to go into another room, or I honestly might not come back here again. Like that's my boundary. Um, Rather than asking people who have no practice doing a thing not to do it. That's like kind of an unfair ask. To say like my boundary is you can't talk about food in a weird way because people be like, oh, I shouldn't, and all of that. Like that is so deeply ingrained in people that it's kind of unfair to say if you cross this boundary, I'll be mad. So I think it's more about knowing what are my own boundaries and what will I tolerate and will I not tolerate. You can always try the cool skills that you've learned from therapy or your friends or those Instagram accounts. Like you can try and see what happens. But I think going into a family situation where you're like, I'm aware of what the dynamic is. I'm aware that I will probably fall into my role in the dynamic. And I have a sense of what I will and will not tolerate. And I have communicated that maybe ahead of time, maybe in the moment, but I have communicated that. you're doing the best with what you have. I think if you can do those things.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I once heard that a boundary is the distance at which I can both love you and myself. And I think that is
Oh,
just like a really great way to think about it. Like so many times you can think of it as like this is a rule you have to follow. And if you've broken this rule with me, then like we have to like talk about it and like you fucked up. And that is like natural. That's kind of like how we think about it often. Like we live in a society that likes to put rules on people and then blame them for breaking a rule. But I think it's so crucial that you can't hold people accountable for things they didn't agree to.
mm-hmm.
Like if you just go to family
Totally.
things saying like these are all the rules, people are going to experience that as like you're just telling me all these things I have to do. And they even if they love you, even if they want to get along, they might have a reaction to that. Versus saying, I know that my aunt is going to say this, so I know that like my boundary, which doesn't always have to be communicated, is just like I am going to come for dinner and then come. I'm not going to like stay with my parents. Like that can be a healthy boundary that can make sure you don't get into situations that have caused fights in the past. And um, I think that's important. Yeah,
Yeah.
Tara put, is it necessary to communicate our boundaries in advance to others? Can we just identify to themselves? I think I'm interested in what you both think about this. I think for me, it depends on the boundary. I know that some boundaries,
Yes.
if I tell my parents, it's going to be a fight, and so I just know I'm gonna leave at 7 because I got here at 9 a.m. and I know that like when I get tired and my parents want to put on that movie at 7, we're gonna get into an argument. This is like not worth it. And some things can be like, hey, Dad, I don't want to talk about this thing. And like, I just need you to know that if you start bringing it up, then I'm just gonna leave the room. And that might be necessary for you to like create that space. But I'm wondering, what you all think.
Yeah, I agree. I think it really depends on the boundary, but I think it also depends on you and the people you're working or that you're going to be in space with, right? Like, you know your family members better than we might. So if you know naming this boundary as a boundary will just not fly, but you still want to give some kind of heads up, that's where like I start to think about, okay, set expectations then. Like with my family, rather than having a boundary of like, if something pops off, I'm just gonna leave and like tune out. I gave my family a heads up, like, hey, it's been a rough year, or it's been a long, like winter season. I'm feeling really tired. So if you see me bow out, it's just I need extra rest. It's nothing major, but you'll see me maybe retreating more to get some rest. Or read my book just because I need quiet time. And that was like a really important way for me to kind of signal that there might be changes in behavior without creating conflict for folks who like at the time might not have completely understood where it was coming from, that particular boundary. What about you,
Yeah,
Melissa?
I know I totally agree with it. It depends on the boundary. Because if your boundary is like, if XYZ happens, I'm gonna leave, that's a perfectly reasonable boundary. And honestly, if you want to not communicate it ahead of time, like you don't have to, I think it'd be really disruptive and confusing and potentially hurtful if all of a sudden you were like, well, I'm out, but you never told anybody that they weren't allowed to say that thing, or that thing was that conversation was not up for discussion. I think that could just cause, or how about this? It could be the catalyst to an argument or a fight where you would have to take responsibility for your role. It wouldn't necessarily be your fault, but it would be like, I played a role here by not communicating this at all. It's like, I feel like I'm saying to clients, friends, whatever, all the time, like, you can't be mad at someone for doing something that you didn't tell them not to do. Like, if you
Mm,
didn't inform them that I don't like this, then, you have a responsibility to name that. But I also agree that, like, my literally 2 nights ago, I said to my dad, I said to my parents, I said, okay, I have a boundary. And my dad went, what's a boundary? And I was like, oh my God. Okay. I was just like, I'm gonna take that to therapy. But So, yeah, I think it really depends on what the boundary is. Something that I would consider is if I don't want to communicate ahead of time, hey, XYZ is like off the table, I would think of what is going to be my response to
Mhm.
XYZ. When it comes up, it'll inevitably come up. You know your own family or whomever you're spending time with, you know the stuff that's going to come up that's going to bother you. So, like, do I have a go to response for that to make it clear that, like, I'm uncomfortable and would like to change the subject now?
Yeah, yeah, I really appreciated that from both of your perspectives. I'm wondering, how do you find the line between like there are some things that you have to communicate, right? Like, uh, uh, my parents referred to me and my niece as the babies until I was like 18, 19, and I was like, nope, nope, I'm grown. Which is like, I don't know how true that was, but I was not a baby, right? I was like, I'm a foot taller than you, mom. Like, there's some things that like you just have to tell people that you don't like. And if you've kept it, I was like, oh, dad, when you put on the game, it's just really weird because I don't know, I see my mom and my sisters don't like football and like I don't like the Cowboys. Like I'm never gonna watch a Cowboys game. So, those sorts of things are things that like, yeah, you got to tell people. And then there's like things that are like really harmful that people should know. Like not to call you a name, right? Like people shouldn't be calling you fat at home, right? Like as an insult, right? So like where do you draw that line between like, oh, this is me not communicating that I don't like this, and actually I think you should know. Because one thing I feel like is I forget how different the lives of my life and my parents' lives are, where like a boundary is a thing that me and my friends talk about all the time. But it's like 77, 8 years old. I'm not sure that I would expect you to know that. Like, how do you navigate that line? Maybe Channing will go with you first.
Yeah, that is such a good question. For me particularly, this is where I do kind of like what we were talking about, like the advanced homework, where I start to think about if something were to happen, like let's say somebody used the wrong pronouns, like how is that going to feel in my body? How's that going to feel in a collective space with other people around me? How's it going to feel if nobody says anything? Um, or someone does say something. And based on that, I kind of choose my pathway that will truthfully like get me to emotional safety as quickly as possible. Now, if I'm not feeling as activated around a thing, that's where I might not necessarily communicate it so overtly. But for me, it definitely the line between subtle communication or prompting of like, hey, don't love when you say that, to, hey, this needs to stop or I'm going to have to head, um, comes with that sensing of, well, how's it actually going to impact my body and how much is it going to take from me to navigate that happening? Um, and am I willing to lose? Like, am I willing to have that experience and then just stick around for it?
I like that sense too of like this idea of safety and where do I find safety? Can I find just safety and centering in my own body, you know? Or dissociate. That's a form of safety. It's a coping mechanism that we want to have other tools for, but it's okay, to dissociate also. But like,
Yeah.
yeah, can I find safety in my own body? Maybe not. Maybe it's like I gotta take a walk around the block. Maybe it's I need to call someone like specific, who will help me feel calm again. Uh, yeah, maybe there's a place in this house I can go to either be alone or something that makes me feel good. I have an Instagram folder in my like a saved folder that I call happy, but all it is really is animal videos. Like, can I go somewhere and just watch that duck again, or whatever it is, and like that will make me feel regulated. Having a sense, I think of yeah, how do I feel regulated? Um, and that can be self-regulation or it can be co-regulation. Is there someone at the dinner, your cousin or whatever, who has kind of the same like politics or values as you, and can you say ahead of time like, hey, when they can it be as easy as like the look, where like, and like that's just enough for you to feel like you're not alone? Could it be like I need a hug? Thinking through like probably ahead of time, what are the ways I can self-regulate or co-regulate in this situation, in this context?
I'm just gonna say I love that you said that. One of my favorite resources is uh, made by a person named Jake Ernst, and it was originally, I think, like just popped on Instagram, but it's called Routes of Safety, and it is wild how helpful that's been because so many of us find and feel safety through different methods. And that was the entire premise of the post was what is going to work for you and speak to you, not only overall, but also within these contexts. So, what are some like micro moments of re regulating that you can find? Is it like touch based? A lot of the things that Melissa named, like, is it closeness and proximity? Do you need private retreat, which was some of the pieces that I was naming? But he included so many different examples of ways that we can find or utilize these routes of safety that I think are still super helpful and relevant. I've used them multiple times, but even in going into the holiday season, to be able to kind of pause and read through some of these and see, even in just reading what resonates with you and keeping those in mind, has been really helpful for me in the past through the holiday season and anytime that I have noticed overall like my activation increasing, like if it's a difficult time of year or a difficult time in my life.
Yeah. Thanks for the preview. Yeah, we're gonna the our takeaway is gonna be kind of going through the routes of safety and making sure that people have at least one tool they can bring to their family conversations. Um, we both Melissa and I put this in the chat, but if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We wanted most of this time to just be answering people's questions. And Zoe asked, how do you talk about Thanksgiving as you enter into family spaces? I know there's not one right answer, but I would love to hear other people handle it. Um, Me and my sister are professional facilitators, so we just tell our parents there's going to be a conversation, and then we do it. And my parents are like longtime anti-racist sort of like workshop facilitators. So like my family probably has a higher tolerance for facilitated conversation at a family space. Um, but I am still a big fan, even if it's not the thing that your family does, to try and build some sort of container where people agree to have the conversation, because I think it can be really difficult to just like start from, especially if there's a gap between your politics and your family's politics, about like it's kind of fucked that we do this, puts a lot of people on defensive, because the first thing that they're going to hear, regardless of if it's your intent, is that like you're saying I'm doing something bad, and this thing that brings me a lot of joy and actually makes me connect to family, and like in a world in which I don't have a lot of connections, is bad. And like that, like then you're going to spend the time going through that. So my suggestion would be like identify for yourself what you want out of the conversation and make sure the conversation's about that. Like, if you just feel bad about celebrating Thanksgiving, then have the conversation about those feelings. If you don't want to celebrate Thanksgiving, come with like alternatives and say like, "Hey, maybe we all can go around and like talk about, why we love each other." We can like have all of these rituals that don't like try and recreate a feast that was like done after a massacre, right? Like if that's the thing that you don't want, you can be like, "Hey, how important is turkey? Like, could we do something else so that this doesn't feel to me like we're like celebrating the massacre of indigenous people?" And I think the important thing is to move from your feelings and not from politics. You can have feelings because you have political beliefs. That's very human. And like you care about people, you care about the history of this country, you care about how marginalized people are treated. You should start from that feeling and not start from the political thing because most people feel like they can't do anything about the politics. It feels really big, it feels really shame ridden, and then you don't give them anything to do. But if you start with a feeling, like this is important to me, then they can talk about what's important to them. They can talk about, you have a conversation about how to honor that feeling. That's a thing that they can solve as your family. They can solve your feeling about a thing. Solving 500 years of colonization in one conversation, like probably not. You might have that family. Like, if you're sitting on 7,000 acres of land stolen from somebody, you might be in the family where a land back is a thing. But for most of us, it's not that we should leave politics out of it. It's that we should lead from the feelings that are the basis of our politics and be really honest that this is personal to us because that's the level at which you can have a conversation with people who don't have your shared politics because you have a relationship. So you can start there. But I'm wondering how you all think about engaging with this big elephant in the room, Thanksgiving as a just directly colonial holiday.
Uh, I stopped celebrating it. So for me, it's like I'm actually living with my parents right now for a chunk of time, and I made sure to remind them of that weeks ago, so that they could like slowly ask questions or have feelings about it or whatever. Of course, my parents are old and or getting older, and so they literally just asked me the other day, "Are you going to be here on Thursday?" And I was like, "No." Remember? Um, but I think there's this piece. I love everything that Aaron said, and I agree. Often when we say politics, what we're really talking about is values. That's what we're talking about. And we're not talking about the government. Sometimes we are, but like really, we're talking about our values and our values when we're aligned with them versus when we don't feel aligned with them give us a feeling. It can make us uncomfortable when we don't feel aligned, or maybe we feel confused. Like, oh, it's kind of a confusing time when it's like I want to see my family. um this is a time when they're all going to gather, and so that feels hard. And I think being able to name those things feels really important, and to name them from a place of this is something that is important to me, and this is a feeling that I have about it, and how can we solve that. But I like the idea of like having some kind of a plan, like, or a suggestion, like, hey, it would make me feel really good if we did this. Because where you're going to come up against, what I come up against, what I'm sure is when you bring it up. Okay, so I was vegetarian for 20 years. I'm currently taking a break because I'm anemic. But I whenever I would say, I don't know if anyone here is vegetarian, whenever I would just inform someone because it was necessary, like, oh, we're gonna go out to eat, like, where should we go? Like, oh, hey, I'm vegetarian. People are immediately defensive. Well, you know what? I love meat, and it's like I don't. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Like I don't care. Like live your life, and I feel like it's the same thing. If you say like, oh, I have complicated feelings about Thanksgiving, people will be like, well, it's not like we're celebrating genocide, and it's like, well, I mean, yeah, are, but like I understand that that's not conscious. Like you're not consciously like, yeah, this is great, and so like, can you also bring some like level of understanding? Like, I understand that we are not gathering here today to like actively celebrate this thing, and this holiday was created to maintain a narrative. And what is that narrative? And that is what makes me uncomfortable. And I think having some sense of people are going to be defensive. Not how do I like cut that off because they're allowed to have those feelings, but like more how do I incorporate that into how I talk about this? So it's not just there. See the family dynamic. There goes the scapegoat again, being mad at everybody and like bringing stuff up and making us all uncomfortable because they named the thing that we all want to keep quiet. So I think if you can be like, yeah, I understand that that's not how you think of it. I get that. And it's made me so uncomfortable that I would like to make a change at this point if other people are into it. Something like that. Channy?
Yeah, well, I will disclose I am based in Canada, so our Thanksgiving, like what we do around Thanksgiving is not as much of a like family celebration. It's less common for people to come home to see family in Canada. And so I just wanted to like give that caveat. But I will also say, Aaron, when you were like not showing up, being like, fuck this, blah, 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 that was 100% me. Like I was a loudmouth that was like, I'm going to be like, I don't want to hear it. And I can't, there have been times, not just about this, but yes, regarding Thanksgiving and regarding like people's orientation towards that time of year and what it's actually about, and that we're kind of ignoring it. I was like, I will take no criticisms. This is outrageous and we shouldn't do this. And that for sure, like, did not work in my favor. Massive, like, there have been big blowouts when I've been that person who's held like I'm going to like come up with a hard edge. For me, similarly, I think to what both Melissa and Aaron have shared, um, it helps to have requests. One of the things that I appreciated was being able to sit down and just talk about it. And being able, like, if family is going to gather, or if it's really important, because we haven't seen each other for a really long time, and people want to come together, that we again acknowledge what's really happening here, and we can at least have a frank conversation about ways that we are um, currently still upholding like colonialism, and how can we do better, and having a deep appreciation for indigenous culture. So like being able to learn and to actually, if we're going to be together during these days, to center indigenous folks and our learning from them and their requests, or folks' requests of us at this point. um, and it was coming with, I think, those requests of being able to have the conversations, being able to think about learning, being able to like address certain things that, for my own feelings and like being vulnerable about that, that I think landed in a really, really different way when I did start to ask for that. And it went, I will say, like from coming in as a hard ass to like coming in with like gentleness and requests and naming the thing that I wanted to, or that I would need us to do if we were going to be gathering during that time. It was like a world of difference. The answers that I got back and the energy that people brought. I think that aspect of being vulnerable, like taking a chance and being vulnerable first and saying you have a need and you have an emotion, can like open a door instead of have people ready with their shield up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful, Jenny. Yeah, my partner Sandra once told me this thing that I've never forgotten. It's really brilliant. It's like the best way to disarm somebody who's defensive is to assure them that you're not attacking the thing they're defending against. And so that's why I think it's really helpful to like know what you want. And like if what you do feel is like fuck these people, I actually think you're a bad person, then like you should strongly consider whether or not you want to have Thanksgiving with them. Like maybe don't show up on holiday. But for most of us, what we actually feel is this makes me super uncomfortable. I feel like the way we can't talk about this is connected to the way we can't talk about other sad things that are happening or things that have happened in my, my life. But I don't think you're a bad person. I don't think that you are, evil or racist necessarily for like having this, right? Like by letting people know that you're not attacking the thing, you give them the space to disarm and say, I know I might, me saying I'm vegetarian might like come up for you as like, oh, you're a bad person for eating meat, but like here are my reasons, and this is a personal decision, and I like understand why you do it. That gives people the space um, to react differently. Um, and I think that there's always an option not to celebrate Thanksgiving, right? Like I feel like in Canada there was a really big like First Nation movement for like this is gonna be a different holiday. And in the US, like we're open to just like have a harvest festival. And like right, that's like kind of what a lot of our families are doing anyways. And we can just be like, this is a good time because most of us don't work in the US. Like we get this time off having a bunch of food that is harvested in the fall is like a great reason to get together. Let's do that and leave all of this like decorations and like all of this other stuff that's about this other holiday. Let's just come together on that Friday because we all still have that off and then just have a big harvest meal. And that could allow people because a lot of people are tied to Thanksgiving because it's a time to see family and it's a time to have a lot of food and like time to do all of these things that happen around that and like you can do all that without it being um Thanksgiving. Um and there was Naima asks, I'm going to a family dinner with my mom and sister. We're still grieving the death of our dad. I'm so sorry to hear that. So things might be tense. What kind of tips would you offer for when the moments feel heavy or full of friction? I think that is a really great question. I'm going to add a um oh, this is sorry. Uh they're doing something weird. So I put in the chat a resource that our comrade Erica created for like how to do a grief ritual. And I know I said like my answer is always going to be have an intense conversation, which like can be really intimidating for some people. Uh, but the grief ritual is um, it's kind of easier to follow. It's a step-by-step process. You could print it out, bring it with your family, and say like, "Hey, I'd just like to name that I know I'm still grieving Dad. Is this something that we could do?" It's also something you could do on your own so that like you are more stable when the friction comes up and you're more spacious to like name it in a gentle way. But I always feel like the conflict that comes is often because we're not giving ourselves the space to grieve. And we tell all of these stories about like we're a downer or it's going to cause conflict. But in my experience, most of the conflict comes from not naming that we have grief and not creating the space for grief. And it can be really helpful to just be like, hey, would people be open to say some like nice things about Dad as we go around, right? And I know there can be, there can be other conflict things that can come up around like, oh, who got this? Where did this happen? And you can ask yourself, what of those conversations do I actually need to have to like be with my family in this moment? And then try and have the intentional conversation about that and the things that you're like, this is too much to bring up for Thanksgiving, to just create a boundary around that for yourself so that you are dealing with the things that you feel ready and prepared to have. And then kind of using that same advice about like whether you do share those boundaries with other people. Would that be a helpful thing or not? Kind of you and your own discernment, but that would be kind of my general trips. Grieve what you can so that you're like more present and ready to have that conversation. Ask people in your family if they're ready to have that conversation and do some pre-discernment work for like what parts of the conversation do you actually want to have and which ones do you not want to have. Um, and think about what's the best way to like communicate that. But I think it's also like, you know, some like my family is a high conflict family. Like there's not a lot of conflict avoidant people. People don't tend to feel unsafe in my family in conflict, which sometimes mean they go a little too far. But if you have families who like hard conversations are difficult, you might want to think about like what are some successful ways that you've seen your family talk about hard things and try and recreate those conditions. How does your mom, what's going to set your mom and sister up for success to like name the friction? Because every family is different. But I'm wondering, Melissa, what do you think about talking about grief? I think I imagine a lot of us have grief with our family because the last couple years have just been a lot.
Oh my God, yeah. Um, I think that we don't have a lot of practice culturally in our families. Obviously, some people have a different experience, but like I sure as hell don't. We don't have a lot of experience talking about our feelings. And grief, but okay, particularly we don't have a lot of experience talking about feelings that we don't like. And grief is one of those feelings that we really, really, really don't like. And even when you think about the stages of grief and you're looking at like different emotions within grief, most of them are ones we don't like. It's not a good time. And so we have a hard time ourselves sitting in grief, and we have a really hard time communicating about grief with other people. Obviously, we create these traditions or events, I guess, like a funeral, something like that. Like we create ways to like be together in grief. But sometimes I know people will express that they feel like, oh, once that was over, it's like nobody ever talked about it again. Like nobody ever checked on me again. None of my friends were like, hey, how are you doing? It's like just for like a month or whatever, you get that space to have feelings, but that's not how grief works. And so I love what Erin was saying about one, is there something that you can do to center yourself in your feelings of grief? And honestly, let's reframe grief for a second. Because yeah, grief sucks. No one's like, this is a good feeling. Nobody likes it. And the thing that's so powerful about grief, I think, as humans, we are aware of mortality. A lot of animals are not. Like they don't have the capacity to think about this their sense of mortality. We do, and we form relationships anyway. Every relationship we ever have will end in grief, whether it's a breakup or your pet dies or someone in your family passes away or there's a divorce or it's the end of your life. Every relationship we ever have will end in grief. And isn't it astounding that we continue to form relationships and fall in love and adopt animals? My puppy is having a nightmare right now. She's like barking in her sleep. She knows I'm talking about her. And we make this choice, and it's like a wild time to think about it. And I think there's something really beautiful that we can't grieve if we hadn't loved. And that's really lovely. And so, can we also consider our grief sacred? Can we reframe our relationship to grief to a really sacred process that we and also other animals have an experience? Crows have funerals, elephants have funerals. I mean, it's wild. And yeah. So I think, how do I center myself in my grief? How do I recognize that my grief is sacred? It's a beautiful and powerful part of being human, even though it feels bad. And maybe thinking of it as an offering to other people to be like, do you want to be in grief with me? Rather than seeing it as, oh, I'm going to be that annoying person who's going to bring up this topic no one wants to talk about. And people get to set their own parameters. If they're like, no, I don't want to have that conversation, then okay. But I think there's something to me about reframing grief that feels important.
I really appreciate that. When both of y'all were talking, what just kept coming to me was that thing that we've named where like grief, the idea of grief, and turning towards it is can just be something that folks aren't ready for. And I think our understanding or what people think grieving looks like is very particular. Like it's sitting around and crying, or it's sitting around and fighting and like and raging at what's happened. And for me, when I think about grieving and what has felt good in a collective space has been making space for storytelling. Um, and if those heavy moments pop up, or if there are moments that are full of friction, like maybe even before going, seeing if there's a time when y'all can have like storytelling. That was one of the most like helpful healing aspects of grieving for me, because it felt like what we were naming, where it wasn't just a one and done moment of like a funeral or a ritual and it's a goodbye. Like there are spaces to tell the stories, and like each of us have known this person in different ways and have different moments with them, so we get to feel full in a different way um about them. But yeah, I think that's the main thing that popped up in my head was seeing if there could be space for storytelling if folks are not comfortable with the idea of grieving.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Um, I think that there is a way in which so much of our conflicts when we get with family actually comes from unprocessed grief, whether it's in the world or in our family. And I really love Martin Pretztel, The Smell of Rain on Dusk, has this quote that I put in the chat that I love, which is grief expressed out loud, whether in or out of character, unchoreographed and honest, for someone we have lost, a country or home we have lost, is in itself the greatest praise we could ever offer them. Grief is praise because it is the natural love, it's the natural way love honors what it misses. And I think that so much of coming to family is there are these beautiful moments of childhood and beautiful moments of each other that are often really fraught because they're at times when we also felt really insecure or just like had bad things happen to us. And so much of the drama of being with family, I think, is not being able to grieve. Like I think about my parents being able to not being able to grieve the like easefulness of maybe me being 6 or 7 when they were like the coolest people in the world and like my dad was a superhero. And then that's like part of the hard part of being with family is that we're grieving that thing and we're grieving, for some families there's events that it's like there was who we were before this and who we are after. And there's this desire to grieve, right? For some families, like the immigration story is so big, even if you're second or third generation, right? For my family, just moving in the Great Migration, there's just this level of trauma and ungrieved things from that move, even though everybody in my family would say, like, moving to LA was a great decision. Like, it's fraught, and my grandparents had feelings about leaving their grandparents in Chicago. And their grandparents had feelings about leaving their grandparents in Tennessee, like that is so much of it. And I think kind of a like there is also an opportunity for us if this is a role that you feel like safe and comfortable in taking, is like approaching our families as like, oh, maybe this is a site to do some healing work. And that like part of wellness isn't just how can I keep away from these people and like have a plan to like be as rested as possible so I can like survive this, but also how can I engage in these conversations, um in these relationships in ways that like offer some healing for me and uh for offer some healing for me and for my family members. Um and kind of looking at what Sarah put in the chat, like that's big discernment. That's not everybody's work, right? Like there is a real difference in how you engage the kind of uh pretty normal hurt and wounds and ruptures that happen in family and in situations where there's abuse or actual attack or like ongoing consistent antagonism, right? Those are really separate conditions in which we have to use different tools and different and kind of take a different stance. And so like part of
Mm.
planning for your wellness for the holidays might be not engaging with your family and like understanding that that's a decision you can make for your own life. And it's not like being alone on the holidays can feel so bad because it's been so commercialized and it's like there's like a Folgers, coffee moment that makes you feel bad if you're just sitting alone in your apartment. But like that might be the mature, healthy choice for you, right? And for many people, like loneliness is almost never about what you're doing. It's about the circumstances that like society puts us in. So I just want to name that, but I'm gonna also, oh, um, it looks like Sarah has stepped out. Um,
Mhm.
uh, and so I kind of don't want to talk about this when they've left, but I do think one of the things that we did plan on talking about is like what do we do with those family dynamics that are actively harmful and actively abusive and aren't just miscommunications or, oh, don't ask me that question, but are like deeper spaces of potential harm. Melissa, I'll kick it to you first.
I mean, I think that's something that's really important is when we're talking about, I think that we have to understand the difference between discomfort, harm. Like we have to be able to understand that there's like gradations of an uncomfortable situation. And I think in the level of discomfort as like these people in my family around this particular topic are going to actively harm me, or create an environment that feels really harmful to me. I agree that I think the question becomes, do I spend time one, okay, I think there's a couple questions. One is like, do I want to spend time with these people in this specific context? And I agree that you can be like, no, I would rather be alone or make other plans or whatever it is. Or I think there's, like anything else, is there a way? Is there a way for me to move through this? And one of the things that I think we have to consider when we're thinking about moving through something is the idea of an empty well. Some people you're going to keep going to for something that you can't get from them. There's no way to get like validation or affirmation or shared grief like in this kind of scenario. And so it's like, well, then I have to go, if I'm going to spend time with these people in this context, I have to know that this particular issue, I'm not going to get my needs met around. And again, and then that informs, so do I want to be in this situation? Can I sit and like hear this conversation and not be angry, or not be angry, but not, be able to like move through it, or not? And are there boundaries that could be set? Are there, I think all of the things we've been talking about. Is there a way for me to feel centered? Is there a way for me to find safety? And if all I can do is not spend time with these people, then maybe that's what we do. Is it possible to get together and say, like, we're not going to talk about this person? Like, because there's so much disagreement around the experience and it's very, confusing and painful for everyone, can we just take this off the table? Would that be enough? I think it really depends on an individual's sense of what would feel safe, but the thing can't be, I expect something that I'm never going to get. And I think that's really hard when it feels like that would just be a natural thing that we like imagine would happen. And I love that Erin put in here the hurt versus harm versus abuse. I think I've also seen it as like conflict, harm, and abuse. They're different things, and I think to know what level are we on. And I think we often conflate them and it's very dangerous. I think we call things abusive way too frequently that are just simply not abusive. There's just no way around it. It's like that's just not abusive behavior. That does not fit the definition of abuse. Um, and similarly, people will call things harm. I work with, people on relationships, and people will be like, he broke up with me and that harmed me. No, that does not harm you. It hurts you. It is not harmful for someone to end a relationship, right? Like, and I think that knowing those differences, it doesn't mean that like hurt isn't really serious. It is, but it's knowing the levels that we're at and like what our needs might be at those different levels of experience. Is there a way? Can you repair hurt? Yes. Can you repair harm? Yes. Can you repair abuse? If the abusive party is also interested in doing that work, yeah. But you might not be interested in that. Um, so I think having a sense of, yeah, what level are we talking about and what are my needs given that that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah, Jenny.
I was gonna name that for me, actually, within my family, there are some family members that I've gotten no contact with because of just some experiences that were painful and what felt like harm to me, and the attempts to repair like weren't working, and it was getting worse. And it was that realization that like, oh, yeah, repair can't happen here, not right now, not between us. And so making the hard call of like cutting ties and deciding that that is best for both of us was really hard on other family members, especially around the holiday time. It was hard on me. I missed out on family time and chose to be alone for certain things and like process the loneliness of missing, of feeling like I don't belong, that there's nowhere I belong during that time. And then there have been times where there have been holiday events or like around Christmas specifically where the family comes together, and in order to be able to like engage and be there to any degree, I had to sit out and like make a full-blown plan about what I could be there for, where was I gonna stay to keep myself safe, or like to have a safe place to retreat to process and be able to just be me, what topics were on the table, what weren't, and if things happened or were brought up, I had already named I wasn't going to have that conversation, or I wasn't going to deal with those kinds of comments, and I would end up leaving for the day, if not like kind of saying, I love you and leave you. This is obvious. We're not at that place yet. Um, and it's not easy. It's taking care of yourself through those choices, especially when you can see the folks around you struggling to like understand or to figure out how to hold the dynamic, this new dynamic that exists. It's it's a lot of work. Um, and I think we can all like resonate with like the emotional labor that sometimes we put into being able to be with loved ones during the holiday season. Sometimes you've got it and you've got that emotional labor to give, and sometimes you don't. And I think for me, that was the call when I was like, I don't got it for this. So I'm going to stay home. I do have the capacity and the resources and a plan that feels accessible to hold myself through the loneliness that's going to pop up being all by myself. And then the times where I was like, cool, I have the capacity to do this emotional labor and to be with people feels worth it in this case. And I feel like I can do this and hold myself through this without coming away like, feeling like I ran an emotional marathon to try and get through everything. But I think a big thing for me was, yeah, like pausing and pre-planning, like what could I actually do and what felt right for my body or my life at that point. And what did I feel like I'd have support around or have my boundaries pushed around. And that would also, like, if I could tell that there were things that weren't going to work, that also really informed the plan too, about trying to be there and not keep facilitating harmful dynamics that impacted me, that hurt me a lot.
Thanks for that journey. Yeah. Yeah, I think the book Conflict and Not Abuse by Cheryl Strolman is definitely a good read. And I think that there is like kind of what we talked about. Like we live in a society that has used abuse systematically to construct very basic aspects of life. Many of us experience regular abuse at school, through religious settings, in our families, and it is like very present. And oftentimes, I think abuse always comes with a power dynamic, and that makes it really hard to bring up. And so when we haven't addressed the spaces where we've been abused and we haven't grieved there was a reason we were in that space, and oftentimes spaces of abuse are also spaces where we get care, and that could be the hardest thing. That's why they can go on for so long. And when we can't grieve who we were before the abuse, or the good parts of the relationship, or the context, or our childhood, or of the religion, when we can't grieve the fact that we've had to step away from that, it can be really hard to not overreact or underreact to hurt and harm, because sometimes we can be hurt and it's touching on abuse, but the importance of separating it is not so that you can be like less dramatic, which I think is like often how we talk about this. Like, be as dramatic as you need to be. The thing that it's important to separate is so that you know where healing is possible and where it's not. And that if you are experiencing hurt that is touching on abuse, no amount of healing the hurt will actually deal with the abuse. And sometimes we can create harm by the way we go about getting, um, dealing with our grievances around a hurt that we can't be honest about the abuse under it, right? So thinking about something that happened in your life and your mom says something and then you're going after your mom, but if your mom wasn't the one who abused you, you can't resolve the feelings that are really there. And I think this is often true. I think like as a black person in the world, there's so much of my shit that's like, fuck the school I went to, fuck all those jobs. And then my parents say something that I feel like is like insufficiently revolutionary, right? And I'm just like, no, like my mom always wants to like figure out a peaceful way to do a thing. And I can find myself getting in a fight. And then I'll say things I don't necessarily fully believe in, like, no, we just need to burn everything down. Not as a metaphor, but all of these people have addresses. And then I'm like fighting with my mom about this thing. And it's like, yeah, I'm mad that I spent like 10 years on the south side of Chicago being stopped by cops all the time. Like, I'm mad that the NYPD put their hands on me and pulled a gun. Like, that's what I'm mad about. And I can't resolve that with my mom because she didn't do those things. And then I think we can have the opposite effect too, right? Which is people do something that's harmful to us, and we can't bring it up because it's so close to abuse we experience, either at their hands or with somebody else, and so we underreact. And maybe our younger sibling or older sibling has different memories and they want to talk about it, but we feel like we can't talk about it because it's so close to the abuse that we experienced. And I find when I struggle with people in my family about talking about harm that I've experienced, it's because it's so close to their abuse, that whatever I experienced, they experienced for longer, maybe from the same institutions, maybe from the same people, and they are so close to it that they can't talk about any hurt or harm because like dealing with the abuse feels like it's too much. And I think that's another reason why it's so important to grieve and kind of like talk about these things. And I think to offer grace, right? Like that's a thing that when I've allowed for more internal safety and gotten more safe boundaries for myself, excuse me, I can offer grief to my family members and grace to my family members who I'm like, oh, we're fighting over. Like I have some uncles who had just like really deep homophobia, and the story that my family tells is that like a coach hit on them. And I'm like, they were 14. Like that was an abusive situation with a coach who made sexual advances to children. Like that is the thing. And that was so impactful. And everybody talks about it as a coach making a pass at them. And I'm like, that's not what that is when you're 14. like it could be a past, but it's in an abusive dynamic with a person of authority in a place that you can't get out of. And like, yeah, so now when I get into fights with my uncles and I realize they're really homophobic, I can be like, "Oh, you are traumatized by an interaction you had as a young person, and you've told a story that was about someone being gay." And I'm like, that was about pedophilia, and that was about being a predator, and that was your first inclination that people move. But these are two separate things, and I can offer grace that like I'm not actually dealing with your well thought out ideology here. I'm dealing with your childhood trauma. And the more I can orient towards like that, which doesn't necessarily mean that like sometimes I can't be here for that. Sometimes you can't be here for the trauma that other people don't recognize. But I can kind of move myself out of the fight by being like, that's what this fight is about. It's not about your political beliefs. It's not about me being like a queer person that I can't come out to my uncles about. It's actually about their stuff. And I can like hold that when I've found my own safety and boundaries.
Mm.
Um, um, so yeah, that I kind of lost the thread and talked for more than I wanted to, but we're getting at the last 15 minutes, so I want to go to each of you and see if you have any kind of last minute questions or suggestions, and then we're going to talk a little bit about just some travel safety tips if you're going to be traveling internationally during any of these trips, and then the routes of safety. So Melissa, I'll go to you to first if you have any like closing thoughts before we wrap up.
I do because earlier I wanted to say this and I didn't. So one really cool, I think, and very simple resource or idea. So there is an organization called the Sanctuary Institute. This is where this comes from. And they do what's called a self-care safety plan. And the idea of a self-care safety plan is that you write down, you're supposed to write it down. You can do it on an index card. You can, I guess you could do it in the notes app on your phone if that's helpful. But what you want to write down is 3 to 5 things that you can do in a moment. Like you always have access to this that will help regulate you. One of those things has to be contact with another being. So when I do this, sometimes it's like I'm going to take 3 deep breaths. It might be, or I'm going to breathe until I'm regulated. It might be doing like a meditation on your phone. It could be I'm going to make a cup of tea. I'm going to do a whole ritual where I make a cup of tea and I sit and I drink it and I'm not doing anything else. That's all I'm going to do. It could be when you're at a party and there's like a dog, or a cat or something, it's like I know that my grandma has that dog, like I'm gonna spend some time, I'm gonna co-regulate with the animal. It could be I'm gonna call, like we had said before, like a friend or get a hug from someone in the space. What is something that you would have access to? Could be go for a walk, whatever, that you can do in a pinch to try to regulate yourself. And the idea is that you should be able to have that on you so that when you're dysregulated, you can whip it out, so you don't have to think, what can I do to regulate myself? You can just kind of whip it out and be like, oh yeah, my list. And you can just keep doing things on the list until you start to feel regulated. And I think that can be a great way of just like really simple tools that can help you feel more yourself and grounded and centered.
Thanks.
That's a great question. Regulated is a state of being where you feel centered, grounded, calm, collected. You could also think of it as regulated versus dysregulated. To be dysregulated is to be activated in some way. Like I have sweaty palms and like my shoulders are creeping up and my heart rate is going really fast. I'm getting aggravated. I'm getting sad. I'm like a really tough emotion is coming to the surface. That would be dysregulation. And so the opposite of that is trying to bring yourself back to a place where you're like, all right, think about, the feeling unless you have anxiety, but the feeling of like right before you fall asleep, where you're like really, or like you get into that theta state during like a massage or meditation or like a yoga class. That is like ideal regulation. But just that sense of like I feel myself. I feel myself. I feel like things are okay. I can get through this. That would be regulation. I don't know if y'all have maybe a better or another way to describe that.
No, I think
Yeah.
that was great. Like, especially the feeling like yourself and like you are able to make choices that feel like you're actually making those choices instead of things like kind of feeling like they're instead of the choices feel like they're making themselves and you're kind of at points being in like the backseat going, what? I okay, all right, cool. That sense of just being at ease with yourself.
Yeah, I think the thing I've always learned about regulation is that like many of us don't remember what it feels like. And so I think the best way I've heard it is like when you go out into the world, things are stimuli, right? Like the lights in your eyes, the way people talk, the noises you hear, the food you eat, that's all stimulus. And like when we're regulated, we can like handle the unknown, we can handle uncertain things, we can handle hurt and still like go on trucking, right? Like somebody um playing drums, like our neighbor playing drums, doesn't screw up our whole day. When we're dysregulated, those kinds of things, like we think about it, we focus on it, we're anxious about it, we're upset about it. We just like, oh man, I started I started the day reading the news and now I've been pissed off all day. Like that's a sign of dysregulation that we weren't able to take that stimuli, process it, sigh it out, and then like keep moving. It like stayed with us. That's a sign of dysregulation, and many of us have normalized being dysregulated all the time. But Tierney, I'm wondering if you might be willing to just kind of walk through really quickly that route to safety uh, document that
Document.
you
Yeah.
shared, and you should be able to
Share
share
screen.
screen because you're a co-host. But if you can't, let me know.
All right. Can people see what's on the screen here?
Yep.
Yes.
Awesome. So yeah, this is the document by Jake Ernst. Go check them out on Instagram. This isn't the only super helpful, informative graphic and resource that they've created. But um, yeah, there's kind of this beginning piece, and they break down the eight routes to safety, which is like inner guidance, structure and certainty, sensory experiences, quality relationships, protective measures, closeness and proximity, private retreat, and common humanity. Um, and so recognizing that we all at different times for different needs might access a different route of safety these and what feels right or what's speaking to us in this moment. So it's not a fixed place, a fixed resource. This isn't your only route is something that I think was highlighted really well. And as he names, like find your routes by asking yourself, what makes me feel safe? So this first one, there's again, really well done way, simple way of thinking through like, what does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? So here are great examples of inner guidance. Um, yeah, I just love this. I think that these are short and sweet, accessible ways or different lengths of accessible ways of feeling and regaining a sense of regulation and a sense of safety. Structure and certainty, I think, like is one that I lean on a lot, especially when I'm going into challenging situations, like the calculating the risks, a schedule, carving out intentional space and time. And I think something that I wanted to flag is sometimes we can almost use this in reverse. Like if we're hearing ourselves say, I need to know, I need to have an answer, I want more choice and control, that might also guide us to which route of safety is going to help us the most in that moment. So it's again that slowing down and pausing and trying to listen in for ourselves, and then using that information, maybe opening this resource and trying to like map what might meet that need. their sensory experiences. This one also, I think, in a short and sweet moment, a lot of these can be accessible, even in like a collective space or a social space, like smelling a candle or like finding a pet or yeah, like looking out the window if you're sat around, quality relationships. So, yeah, one of the ones here is like finding a person if they're not there with you over the holidays. Perhaps you like ask a friend, a trusted friend, or a trusted loved one that is not there, if you can message them or lean on them or have a check-in for yourself or for both of you later in the evening to have that deep connection moment where you do feel like you can be authentically you and feel what it is that you're feeling without a feeling that you're going to be judged or punished for it. Closeness and proximity, like physical touch, private retreat, needing quiet time alone, kind of like making yourself feel like if your body is not necessarily feeling like a safe space right now, or you're feeling really dysregulated, trying to create a physical environment around you that will hold a sense of safety. Protective measures. We've talked about, setting boundaries, self-sufficiency and pragmatism, reconciliation, common humanity. Again, I think we've talked about some of these things, like allowing mistakes and imperfection, like holding things with grace and knowing that that might not be the argument that you're having isn't necessarily with or about the thing that y'all are actually arguing about. Um, and then this resource comes with my routes of safety or routes of safety. So picking routes that like in general speak to you and filling that out. I would also include pausing and maybe picking a route that will A, feel accessible, but will also, based on previous experiences across the holidays, meet the needs that you've noticed come up in the past, like that have been activating or dysregulating, so that you have a route that hopefully, and some preferred strategies that hopefully, if behaviors persist or if like topics come back up, that you already know this when you thought of it, like felt like it would be a good accessible measure to have a return to safety for yourself. So yeah, this is the resource. It's awesome. I love it. Like definitely made me think about safety and what was what I could actually do in a completely different way. Um, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Channy. For the folks at home, we mentioned it. Uh, and so I just want to name a couple of things. We're gonna put on the blog post that comes out of this some of the more things we didn't get to, some of the like international travel safety things, and we'll put the routes to safety guide on the blog post, and we'll send that out for folks. One thing I do want to just like put out there is I know there like a lot of people are worried about traveling internationally, and there can be this sense of like, oh, am I overreacting if I do these things? And I would say like at this point you're probably not overreacting, and that it can be good to really have a plan, right? Make sure that somebody both in the US and in the country you're going to knows your travel plans, knows to like try and contact and find you if they don't hear from you from a certain time. I think buying a like travel phone that doesn't have, especially if you're engaged in any activism that doesn't have social media on it, and you so when Border Patrol asks, hey, can I open this up? You can be like, yeah, and there's nothing in it. There's nothing compromising on that device. Um, I think that that is gonna have to be like kind of standard practice. It's not happening to everybody, but it is happening to a lot of people, and it's happening to people that you might not expect it to. So I think that you should have some additional caution if you're leaving, and if for some reason, like you're staying for a really long time or you just have to take your devices, I would say take most social media and signal off of it, and then add it back on when you're at a safe Wi-Fi destination. And just things to think about. We'll put like a more comprehensive guide. Um, but just know that a lot of us are gonna travel internationally to get a break or to see family. And so it's important to just like think that through because it's not just about your safety and how much time you spend with the TSA, which is important. It's also just to make sure that they don't have the ability to map out activist networks. Um, yeah. Um, and so yeah, we'll send a couple of resources. But thank you all so much for joining. Thanks for everybody who's watching at home. I hope that you find a way to keep yourself well and that wellness allows you to experience some joy and some connection over the holiday season, whether that's with your family or with your cats and dogs or going out to hug a tree. I hope you all are well and safe and find joy this season. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bye, y'all.